Okay, good evening, dear hearts. This is another episode of the Inner Dance Show. And supporting us in a return to sacred flow today is the wonderful Thorn, who I lovingly refer to as the Labyrinth Keeper of Dundee. But Thorn is based in Scotland, and since 2006, he has run Labyrinth Magic, bringing the power and beauty of labyrinth based inner work into workshops and retreats. And he has 5 books out on Amazon and a YouTube channel of over 60 crafted guided meditations, which I myself use all the time, and they're amazing. And I know Thorn because I attend his monthly labyrinth at the Dundee University chaplaincy, and I've got the honour to go to another one of his beach labyrinths at Tensmuir Beach, which is coming up. But anyway, Thorn, thank you so very much for the time and for being here today. It's a real honour to spend this time with you and to get to know more about the magic of labyrinths. How are you today?
Thanks, Caroline. I'm fine. It's really nice to talk to you, and thanks for sharing this little opportunity to talk. Because it's so nice. Because normally, when you come to the labyrinth, of course, it's all in silence,
Yeah,
so we can't really talk. We sort of mime.
yeah, absolutely. And yet, even within that silence, there's so much potency. There's actually,
Yeah,
I find that when I'm walking the labyrinth, that the first half of the labyrinth is actually a lot of questions and confusion.
yeah,
And I find that, yeah, I even doubt myself at certain points and think I'm getting lost. And I trust that that's part of the
mm,
process. And then when I come to the second half of the labyrinth, insights
yeah,
start to emerge and
yeah,
answers arise. Anyway, that's
yeah,
just my personal experience. But I'd love to hear from you, the labyrinth keeper, all about labyrinth. So
oh
however
God,
you would like to introduce them to us, we will go with you.
yeah. Well, thanks, Carol. It's funny because I was trying to think in advance. Gosh, there's so much on it, and I don't really how to sort of go through it in this little bit of time. But I suppose a good starting point is just to maybe think about what a labyrinth is. Um, for a basic definition, there was a very knowledgeable German art historian called Hermann Kern, who died quite young actually, who compiled this massive catalogue of labyrinths through history. In fact, it's surprising nobody said, hang on, that's an impossible task. There's no way you could catalogue them all. So he kind of catalogued as many as he could with a wide knowledge. And his book is still the authoritative one, which is, well, actually, it's quite rare now, but nonetheless. But sorry, he defines a labyrinth quite strictly as a single pathway that moves through itself, turning back and forth. It fills the whole space it takes up, but it doesn't have any junctions. It doesn't allow any choice, as it were. Um, and for him, it was a very tight definition. Now, I kind of would temper that definition with a more experiential angle because I think that what is labyrinthine can include junctions and choice. I don't
Mhm.
discount mazes from being spiritual tools, although most mainstream labyrinthology does. And I think that the beauty of labyrinths is that they offer to us a description that we can experience, that we can walk through, of
Yeah.
order and chaos together and the infinite within a finite plane. Because when you look at a labyrinth pattern, either from ground level, sort of standing before one, or looking at one, as a picture, immediately you sort of gather that there's a way into this pattern and there's a center, there's something to go towards. But all the bit in between is a big sort of a coil, a bit like a big fork full of spaghetti. So you kind of gather that you can get from A to B, but you really don't know how. And I think that's part of the beauty of labyrinths is that they do take you through this swirling ethereal of a worldly place of confusion and of a very sort of charming chaos and for that, they sort of are a metaphor, obviously, for life throughout history. And it's a bit hard to sort of, obviously, labyrinths have been around for at least 4,000 years. And they've arisen in various different sort of, not civilizations, but, sort of epochs of people, different cultures, and so on. And have had many uses, but they've always generally had a sort of a symbolism of transformation as far as we can guess. because the earliest labyrinths, we don't have this sort of the software guide with, we just have the hardware. We have maybe an etching on stone or something of labyrinths. We don't know how people used it, but from the stories that survive with labyrinths, they always point at transformation and moving from one state to another. And I
Hmm.
think that sort of still holds today, a bit like you were saying in your experience of walking in. We kind of go in not quite knowing where the labyrinth will take us and what will pop up along the way. But I think it always delivers. We always end up with insights and something quite beautiful. And even if we are just on a very prosaic level catching up with ourselves, it's really valuable in the way that we live now, at least in the West, to have that time to reconnect with ourselves. So I think that's maybe for me the beauty of labyrinths, and I've greatly enjoyed being able to do so many of them, to create so many for other people to enjoy as well.
Yeah, wonderful. A beautiful Thorn, just how lyrical you are and how you describe them, that sense of
Oh,
order and chaos and sort of a finite sense of time, space. And
yeah.
as, as you were speaking about the order and the chaos, I was reminded of, again, sometimes when I look at particular labyrinths, I imagine the brain. And
Mm,
again, the first half is the left linear brain that's trying to make
yeah,
order out of something
yeah,
chaotic. And then the when you're coming back round, it's the right brain. It's
yeah.
fi- it's finding peace within the chaos, and order arises sort of organically. And this sort of
Yes,
blended consciousness that the labyrinth invites us into.
yes. That's really yes. That's a very nice way of putting it, Caroline. Yeah, because on the one hand, I try to for the labyrinth at Dundee, I try to sort of pitch it at a very wide audience, in that whether you identify sorry, excuse me, whether you identify as spiritual or
Hmm.
religious or atheist or an occultist, whatever, really, you'll find the labyrinth an interesting place, and you'll find quite a lot can happen in there. One of the fabulous things about labyrinths is that they're sort of as I was giving the definition earlier, they very much are sort of archetypal images as well,
Hmm.
archetypal
Yes.
symbols, but they're ones that come to life by our interacting them, because you can't really know what a labyrinth is. It doesn't really mean anything until you actually walk into it and start feeling its confusion, its defining quality. So I love
Yes.
the
Yeah.
fact that they require to be interactive, and I think that as archetypal symbols that arose, at least 4,000 years ago, they wouldn't have survived in our collective unconscious unless they were actually some kind of survival tool. I don't mean that they helped us sort of hunt or
Mm.
gather, but I do think that things drop off from our human experience if they aren't really relevant anymore. So I think it
Yes.
constantly, we find relevance in it wherever we're coming from, and that's a really powerful symbol. If you think
Yeah.
about a symbol like the cross, that has a history much older than Christianity's usage of it, but it's very much, at least for us here in the West, we very much have that sort of Christian branding of it to our mind. And I guess perhaps another example is the symbol of the swastika, which is again quite a universal symbol that is largely a sun symbol and a benevolent symbol in most cultures. But of course, because of Nazism, we have that huge besmirching of it, in our
Yes.
consciousness that affects how we view it. So, but I think a labyrinth is quite a clean symbol generally.
Yes.
We all have our own things we bring to it, but we don't sort of flinch from it, or cringe
No.
at its history, shall we say?
No, that's right. So it's timeless, isn't it? I guess that's what I'm hearing you
Yeah.
say. From the beginning of time, there's something familiar, recognizable about this sacred geometry. And I love how you
Yes.
name it. It's interactive. There's something for me about how relational it is, and that every labyrinth has its own personality. And also, depending on the people who are walking the labyrinth at that time, there's
Yes.
there's a collective relationship happening as well. And for me, themes emerge
Yeah.
and patterns that I start to notice not only in myself and my own thinking and journeying, but how I'm noticing sometimes in the other walkers of the labyrinth.
Mm. Yeah. that's really true, Carolyn. That's a really good point because I find it I'm very much sort of a what's the word, a facilitator, if you like, for the labyrinth space. I love setting it up at the Dundee Labyrinth I'm talking about, which is it's an indoor
Hmm.
canvas labyrinth that was actually bequeathed to the University of Dundee Chaplaincy Centre way back in 1998 by Andy Lovian of Enterprise Insights in Dundee. It's still going. Sorry, I'm getting the business. I wanted to give him a plug because it's very incredibly kind of him to have donated this labyrinth all that time back then. Um, and actually, sorry, slight plug here, but the labyrinth is 25 years old this
Wow.
year in November, and it's also the longest running provision of a labyrinth walk by any education institution in the UK. So we really want
God.
to celebrate that this year. I should add, I'm the honorary chaplain of the Labyrinth under my sort of daytime name of Robert Holmes, because Thorn is my sort of spirit name that I write and present workshops under. So I've been doing the Labyrinth there 15 years this November as it happens as well. So
Wow, amazing.
a big, hopefully we'll get a big celebration and sort of put that out there for November because it's really something to celebrate. But I wanted to just mention how you said about the relationships within the labyrinth and how you feel your own walk is, if you like, tempered by the experience of the other energies and heart forces of people walking it. I think that's one of the greatest gifts that the labyrinth at Dundee has given me because I really feel I've sort of been an apprentice to it, as it were. Um,
Yes, yes.
what happened was that after having been living on a retreat center and then traveling around the world, I sort of got back to Scotland in 2006, not really knowing what to do. And I rented a friend's cottage out in Crail in Fife by the sea. And I was kind of, you sometimes, I'm sure many people have been to this, where you sort of pitch up somewhere and think, well, this is nice. I don't have a job. I don't have any money. Wow, this is scary. What am I going to do? But
Yeah.
in the midst of all those sort of daytime survival, all that work, a friend who I met here, um, well, actually, do you know? Let me tell you the full story, Karen. So what happened was I was in my little cottage in Crail, and I was walking along the beach every day, dealing with my panic attacks, thinking, this is beautiful. What am I going to do with my life? Because I was about 38 then. I hadn't really, I sort of jumped off the career ladder completely to go and live at the retreat centre. And there was a crystal shop. There is a crystal shop in St Andrews where I plucked up my courage and I was walking along the beach and I was doing my beach labyrinths. And it occurred to me, well, there's no reason to not run a little group from your living room. You've got a lovely little cottage here. It'd be really nice. I don't know anybody, but I'll try it. So I went along and I put a sign up in the local crystal shop in St Andrews. And my
Hmm.
friend Alison worked there. And as it happened, Alison Strandberg, sorry, I should name the name, give her a shout out, lovely lady, and she ran her own little group of meditation and stuff, and she brought them all along to my labyrinth group. So that sort of started off going, and she said, "There's a labyrinth in Dundee you should go to. Do you want to go?" So I went along with her. Um, we all drove along in my car to the labyrinth at the chaplaincy, which was then run by, oh my goodness, Nick Halpern. Sorry, Nick. Sorry, so long I've forgotten your name. And another chap as well, two gentlemen were running it. And they had a sign up saying, "We've been doing the labyrinth for 8 years. We're kind of ready to hand it on. Does anyone want to take it on?" So I sort of immediately sort of went
Yes,
forward.
yes.
And, from then, I've been sort of looking after the labyrinths, as it were. And, I did take a couple of notes before we started, Caroline, because I wanted to just sort of put into words what that labyrinth particularly has given to me. Um, and as well as sort of obviously, it's sort of you're laying out this canvas, or actually you're transforming the chapel itself into the labyrinth, which means you get there, you think, right, let's hopefully the altar's been moved, but beyond that, move all the chairs away, the lectern away, maybe sweep the floor, lay out the
Hmm.
labyrinth, put it together, hoover it, then energize it, sing my little labyrinth song for energy, and bring in some Reiki, light the candles, invite in the spirits, um, and all of that, and then kind of be ready for it. And of course, when you're looking at that pattern, I was working out, I must have done, oh, I don't know, 150 labyrinths there now, trying to tot up the years. It's quite a lot of mass. But looking at the pattern, you're sort of seeing the sacred geometry. And I'm no expert at all on sacred geometry because I'm terrible at maths. I really am. But I define sacred geometry as any place you go to with a prayer in your heart. And that can be a
Mm.
forest, a beach, it can be a concrete bunker. It really doesn't matter. It's more where you are inside. Um, and what Labyrinth there at Dundee has given me, aside from these wonderful insights of just a pattern to play with and explore, um, it's also allowed me to enjoy the experience, if you like, of duty, because although it's a
Yes.
task laying out the labyrinth, and it's a lot of work, and sometimes it's a bit hard. Sometimes you get groups coming that sometimes people's energies might be a little
Mm-hmm.
bit challenging or, quite needy, and that's fine because that's what it's there for. But it's not always a smooth ride. Um, but, the most beautiful thing it's given to me is just this experience of love where I've seen different people. Sometimes you kind of look up in the midst of the blur that you feel as different energies move in to the
Yes.
labyrinth for the night. And you're not really aware of what they are, because I'm very much on the border. I just hold the space, as it were. But you really feel, wow, something's moved in here. Something
Yes.
big's going on for the people in there. And that's fine. In fact, sometimes I have to sort of grip the chair I'm sitting on to stay with it and awake and not fall to the floor because it is so strong and trippy, and you're just aware that some really powerful energies are moving
Mm-hmm.
in through the labyrinth due to the arrangements, the sort of the geometry, if you like, of the people who've come, the matrix of their energies
Yes.
and heart lights. So, and I sometimes just really looked at the diverse group of people who are maybe all sitting together in the labyrinth at the center, around the
Mm-hmm.
candle, just in quiet, in shadow, maybe taking up a card. And I've seen such a mix of, young students who've come for the first time, but maybe don't want to say a word, they just want to get what they need to get. Of maybe an elderly couple who can barely walk, who've, just gone in there and are sitting down, and you just feel that complete silent and spoken love between strangers who are not strangers at all but don't know each
Mm-hmm.
other's name. And that's a really, perhaps that's the most powerful thing I could hope to have in my life. And when I left the retreat center, it was really hard to do because I was living at Dundee Lodge near Callendar, where they are very into yoga, Reiki, fire walking, and stuff. I sort of trained in Sundoor firewalk and spiritual workshop leadership there and stuff. But it was really hard to leave because it was jumping off into the real world again, if you like. And the
Yes.
one thing I asked for was I just said, please could the magic stay with me in my life. And it has done. It doesn't mean that life is roses or that things like The Secret are necessarily true. I'm not rolling in big books or anything like that. I don't have my own retreat center, all the things people wish for, perhaps. But I think if you can still feel magic in your life, then you are very lucky and very humbled. So I kind of feel the labyrinth has been my lifeline, if you like, through that in a slightly passive way, where I tend
Mm-hmm.
to hold the space. I don't walk the labyrinth myself. But talking specifically about the Dundee one, I feel that's been my kind of defining role, if you like, and it's meant so much to me. So I'm very glad when I hear feedback like your own, Caroline, of how, well, what an experience it is for them as well. It's not really from ego I'm trying to talk from. It's just, but
Yeah.
I do want to know that it works, that it is working. So I've talked a while there.
Absolutely.
I'll stop for a second.
No, not at all. I mean, um, we'll, there'll be some photographs that I'll be sharing so that people can have a look for themselves about the Dundee Labyrinth. But just, entering into the space and feeling your sense of duty and care and love of the labyrinth. I feel a feminine energy, so I'll refer to it as herself,
Mm,
but it's the space that you have co-created with the labyrinth. It's tangible, it's very powerful and very, very tender. So
yeah,
anyone who is close to Dundee or who is driving through, I cannot recommend highly enough. On
oh,
is it the first Monday of,
it,
not the first
it,
Monday, it's the
it's
first Wednesday or
It's
second?
it's actually the second Wednesday of each month, Caroline. Yeah, so it's okay. It's the second Wednesday of every month, and it runs from 7 o'clock until 9. and I just closed the doors at about 8:30 because you need a little bit of time to enjoy the labyrinth. I wouldn't want somebody turning up at 10 to 9 and
No, no,
being frustrated.
absolutely. Yeah, for and so, I don't know very much about labyrinths other than my experience of walking them, but what type of labyrinth is the one at the Dundee chaplaincy?
Yeah, well, that one is it's an exact, well, an almost, well, it's an exact in size replica in on canvas of the one in Chartres Cathedral in France, which was built, let's say about 1202, uh, certainly in the early 13th century. And it's a type of labyrinth that's called a medieval labyrinth by those who are into labyrinths a lot, labyrinth scholars. And its history is quite an interesting one. If you want to go back through labyrinths themselves, the first labyrinths would date from about 2000 BCE, and they survive as petroglyphs, as etchings in stones that are out and weathered. Um, there are some Marin in Spain. Um, that The thing with petroglyphs is they're very hard to date. There's actually one carved on, I think it's Oakley Moor uh, in Yorkshire, and that was, oh gosh, was that in the late 19th century or the early 20th century, or maybe mid 20th century? But the thing is, it's weathered so quickly that when you look at photographs of it from the, say, the 80s, it looks quite sharp and new. But now it's really weathered away quickly, and actually a more UK-based one down in Tintagel in Rocky Valley, there are two famous etchings in stone of two classical labyrinths, which is kind of a simpler, the most historically common labyrinth pattern. And they are on a bit of rock down there. And there was a plaque, there may still be a plaque saying that they date from the Bronze Age, but that was really just taken from an antiquarian's guess back in the
Right,
19th century. And they're more likely, I think, to be carved in the 18th century because there was a mill there. And
right.
there's a
Okay.
wonderful lab site that Jeff and Deb Soward run this a site called Labyrinthos online, and they are certainly the main authorities today on labyrinthology, as it were. And there was an article in Keyadroy, which is the journal, one of the journals they put out, looking at those labyrinths. But sorry, I just mentioned those Rocky Valley ones because it's kind of hard to date labyrinths. Because obviously there would have probably been labyrinths made on maybe on made temporarily in dirt on ground, maybe on cloth, maybe tattooed and painted on bodies. We don't really know. But what would survive to today are things in
Hmm.
stones. So we're kind of looking at 2000 BCE as a probable starting date. The first one we can properly date is on a clay tablet from Pylos in Greece. And it's and as it happened, it survived because the palace of King Nestor, where it was,
Hmm.
burned down about 12,000 BCE. Sorry, 1200. Then, and it was baked by the fire. So this clay tablet survived. And on one side, it's got a listing of 10 people's names and some goat images, which presumably is maybe the goats that were brought into the palace that day. But
Okay.
on the back, there's this labyrinth etch. So that's the first one we can securely date to
Wow.
1200 BCE. But we don't know what it was for. It's very much contextless. And labyrinths kind of have evolved. They basically first formed, we can say with certainty, around the shores of the Mediterranean, and then they
Hmm.
spread upwards, up into the Baltic states, all the way up to Arctic Russia, particularly in Scandinavia. Sweden has about, I think, 350 historical labyrinths. It's got the greatest number of historical ones. Um, Labyrinths then spread along the Silk Road into all the way to India, down to Sumatra and so on. There's a big independent historical labyrinth offshoot tradition in India, which is fascinating. And labyrinths also appeared in the southwestern American states, Arizona, Nevada, and a little bit of Mexico, amongst some of
Wow.
the First Nations there. Whether they were taken there by Spanish missionaries or arose independently is a matter of conjecture. I personally think the labyrinth pattern isn't hard to discover if you're working in basketry and so
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
But no one can quite say because you haven't got a historical one that dates back. to that date. But sorry, the reason I'm giving this preamble is just to sort of take us on a mental map of how labyrinths spread, because they kind of stayed in a basic classical form, um, excuse me, for quite a bit of time. But they also start to appear in Gothic France, and the history of our medieval pattern, like the Chartres labyrinths, which we find on canvas at Dundee here, is that round about 900, uh, the year 900, in Christian manuscript traditions, the labyrinth evolved there, as it were. So these scribes in the monasteries were repeating sacred texts or philosophical texts, copying them out on vellum, on parchment, as it were. They couldn't really change the text, but they could change what they illustrated. They could sort of doodle, if you like, not quite doodle, but do very subtle
Right.
doodles, as it
Okay.
were. And
Yes.
the labyrinths had always been used as a pattern for the liturgical year, for the sort of the calendar year.
Yes.
Um, and so they kind of basically they evolved our simpler classical labyrinth pattern into the medieval one we know today. And the medieval one is recognizable because it has sort of a cross pattern embossed across all of the bits of the circles. So you have four axes, whereas the classical labyrinth had one. If you imagine a labyrinth as a set of rings like tree rings, where the
Mm-hmm.
older classical labyrinths have one axis at 6 o'clock on the clock's face, where that 6 o'clock hand would fall. But the medieval ones also put axes at 12, 3, 6, and 9. And so you have a lot more movement in a medieval labyrinth, a lot more twisting and turning, and that's part of the fun. Both of them allow you to be lost in different ways, but there's a very, the medieval labyrinth pattern is perhaps more elegant or more complex, certainly. And it,
Mm-hmm.
although it arose for a Christian use, it sort of, again, has sort of evolved beyond that initial uh, cache, as it were, and it has a lot more.
Yeah.
We think of the four directions, you can think of many things that fit into it. Oddly enough, along the way of along the way of labyrinth evolution, after the classical labyrinth spread, the Roman Empire really took up the labyrinth symbol, and there's a separate family of Roman labyrinths. There would have been hundreds in their day, but only about 60 or 80 still survive in part or fully. But Roman labyrinths also made a four division of the circular pattern, but what they did, they sort of put four labyrinths into one. So you had to complete each quarter of the labyrinth pattern fully before you could move into the next one. Whereas in the one at Dundee, the medieval labyrinth, the Chartres one, you can move between the different quadrants, as it were. So you're much more feeling and
Yes.
lost and swirling about in the inner cosmos, as it were. But the Roman
Yeah.
labyrinths, although you won't see any really made today much because they're not really viewed as that interesting, perhaps because they don't allow such confusion. But
Right.
interestingly, they had a lot of apotropaic. I always have to rehearse how to pronounce that word. Apotropaic sort of protective functions, amongst other things, and they were laid in some cases on the ground, like a bit like we put a horseshoe over a door for good luck.
Okay.
They functioned quite probably as spirit traps, amongst other things, to the Romans. In that the
Right.
idea was that bad energies would go into the pattern and be lost on the way in. However, I should temper that by saying they didn't quite take them that seriously because there's a lot of mistakes.
Right.
Excuse me,
Okay.
take sorry.
Interesting. So I'm still with the monks in France, and I'm imagining them sort of their meditative drawing practice of sort of,
Yeah,
you know, doodling these shapes and different styles of labyrinth. So that for me, there's something about how really in each age, in each epoch that you're describing, there was an understanding about the labyrinth and well-being,
yes,
and
yes,
and how the Romans maybe they tried to develop their own style, and there was something about puzzle perhaps and
yeah,
logic and as you say, understanding the labyrinth can be a portal, but we can also it can also close the door if it's done in a certain way, and it can, as you say, sort of trap the energies that they don't want to welcome in.
Yes, that's absolutely right, Caroline. Thank you. Yes, sorry, I was just scrabbling for a cough sweet then. Sorry, I've got a wee bit of a cold.
No, I hope you're feeling
Yeah, that is.
okay.
No, I'm. No, do you know that's very true? And actually, I do feel that that sort of is kind of what we still feel today from the kind of spirit trap aspect. I do feel that labyrinths can very greatly dissipate our energies outwards, and I think because of a lot of the geometry that's going on in there and what we take into them ourselves,
Hmm.
even if we don't understand what spirals do and this, that, and the other as the pattern is laid out, a labyrinth can really, when things are popping up into your mind as you walk a labyrinth, which could be something maybe you're focusing on sending healing, or you just want to walk and just sort of play out a scenario in your head and just check where you're at with it. Maybe you're
Yes.
just walking with no intention. You're just thinking, what is this thing I'm walking through? But different things can arise. Then there might be, they can range from unexpected historic memories of your own, from your own recent past or your own prehistory, as it were, all the way back to birth. You can sometimes have quite deep visions or insights. You may
Hmm.
hear the labyrinth talking to you because I think they're kind of excellent mirrors. Maybe they're
Yes.
insane.
Yeah.
It depends how you want to look at it. But
Yes.
I think there's a real you can have conversations with labyrinths, as it were.
Yes.
And I think that all that is sort of reflecting back as a part of dissipation as well. And I think if you like stuff that you, well, this is a purely personal take. I couldn't quantify this at all. But I think that some of the things that we take in there, the labyrinth will kind of find its own way to what we need to look at now and maybe what we can be helped to let go of. In a similar
Yes.
way to how Reiki energy will go to where it needs to go and perhaps flow elsewhere if it isn't quite appropriate, at that time for the person you're sending it to or the thing you're sending it to. I think labyrinths too, particularly when we make the great ones out on the beach, there's
Hmm.
this sense of all the elements being there, washing through as we're grounded, we're completely in touch with above and with below. We have the knowledge that the pattern we're walking through is going to wash away that night or the next high tide with all that salt water, all that purifying salt. And it's quite hard to put into words, but I really feel the ripples of energy moving
Hmm.
into us and also away from them. And I think the beach labyrinths are particularly powerful in ways. I think they're probably quite simple, but I'll never fully understand if that makes sense. They're very elemental and they're very
Yes.
powerful ways of releasing, but also, gosh, charging on so much. They're such dynamos of energy that we take in on those beach ones. I
Yeah.
can't wait to do the next one. They're such powerful things. They're wonderful things.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
again, I can't recommend those highly enough. As my first beach labyrinth, I was so powerful. I was so I was well moved to tears. But there's something about the liminal space. The beach is
Mm,
by the water, and at Tentsmuir, so there's the forest as well, and
yeah.
also the impermanency of it. That at some point, that beautiful creation that you've made in the moment will be washed away.
Mm,
You know,
yes.
similar to the mandalas, perhaps that the Buddhist monks would create over
Yeah.
months or years, and then as soon as it was completed, they would just sweep them up.
Yeah. Yes, and yes, that isn't that an amazing act of non-attachment? Wow. Yes, it really
Yeah.
is. Yes, because that's a really good analogy, Caroline. That's really good. Yes, yeah. I find the same when because in my books and things and workshops, I always like to encourage people to make labyrinths anywhere, within reason, not break the law or anything. But but say if you have a wonderful canvas of blank snow that's fallen, if you kind of know the labyrinth pattern, its pathway, as it were, you can just
Yes.
scoosh labyrinths out with your feet. And again, they are very impermanent ones as well, the
Yes.
beach ones and the ones. I mean, I'm blessed just now where I live. We have a nice garden where I can lay out ones on the lawn as well, just temporary ones. So that's been
Right.
fabulous. I've been able to play with so many different patterns in my
Yes.
own time. But even if you don't have that to hand, you can actually walk labyrinths in your mind invisibly. No one needs to know you're walking a labyrinth. In fact, I've got a funny example of this. Back when I was traveling when I went to Teotihuacan in Mexico and I was climbing the Pyramid of the Sun, we sort of went with all these crowds of people going round the terraces one way or another. And I was aware that it's actually formed a big rebound labyrinth, and they are sort of simple embryonic labyrinths that just zigzag back and forth. Um, they're very simple ones. But I was conscious as I walked up, I was following this pattern. And as it happened, I'm very into saying mantras silently. So I was saying this big mantra that I was doing at that point in my life in my head. And just as I got to the end and to the top of the labyrinth, literally, this huge peal of thunder broke out because a storm had been brewing all the time. And I thought that was rather cool. It was kind of a big labyrinth, equal perhaps to the way that Glastonbury Tor is used now as a 3D labyrinth. But
Right.
the point is that you can sort of, if you're working with a labyrinth pattern, as well as just walking the physical construct of it, it doesn't have to be with your feet. You can get the same sort of connection and profound insights through finger labyrinths. And also, if you've memorized the pattern, which actually is not as hard as it sounds, well, it is for the simpler patterns, certainly, but you can then be maybe just walking out in nature. And I like to do,
Yes.
like, well, just to follow the pattern in your head, you kind of know where the turns are. You might
Yes.
just come through and just think, actually, I know where I am in the labyrinth. It's a bit like when you're walking the Dundee Labyrinth. You sort of stop and think, oh, I'm here. Okay, I recognize this bit, or I don't, but I see which bits of turns I'm in. And sometimes, if you work with labyrinths a lot, um, you'll find you end up in dream labyrinths,
Hmm.
which the sort of area of dream and psychic labyrinths is a whole um, quite hard to talk about area, but that's quite a profound thing as well, because there you'll end up in labyrinths that are beyond any scale that could be realized in physical dimensions. Um,
Yes.
and all I can really say that is, if you're really into labyrinths and you find they're starting to appear lucidly to you, then that's really something. Just enjoy, and hopefully you'll be able to journal it when you wake up again. But they're very elusive, like little snowflakes. They melt so quickly, dreams. But
Right. Okay.
yeah, it's amazing how they really can flow into so much of your life.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm hearing how they really are portals, and the scope of them is infinite.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah, gosh, I feel like I'm at a point in the labyrinth where, oh, I got lost there for a second. But
Oh yeah.
thank you for bringing in sort of the invitation, for myself and anyone listening, that actually we can create our own labyrinths, and it can be very simple. In fact, we know, even if we've never walked a labyrinth before, it's an
Mm,
archetype, so the shape is familiar to us, and that we could create a simple one, whether it's in a garden if we have them with some stones, or whether it's
yes.
just walking a pattern and trusting the path, whether it's on a beach or
Yeah.
in nature. And
Mm,
as you say, that that they might begin to appear lucidly to you in dreams, and which kind of reminds me of the meditations that you offer through your YouTube channel. That for me, they I find them very labyrinthine, and they create a labyrinthscape for me in my mind's eye. And I'm wondering,
yeah.
was that one of the intentions with your meditations, to support people into
Yeah.
more lucid dreaming of the labyrinth?
Do you know it is, Caroline? Yes, thank you. Yeah, because a lot of the meditations, I've always sort of done meditations within workshops and things, and I when I until recently I was running a regular meditation group. Actually, I just let it sit for a little while so I could carry on writing books. But I generally would always do a journey beforehand, a shamanic journey, just to see really what meditation, what space to go into, to maybe get
Hmm.
some, if you like, at the narrative. And they do draw on some dream elements as well, and they often are labyrinthine because a bit like moving through a labyrinth or a mandala, we sort of reach these different touchstones, these different points along the way. And it's kind of like they swirl up out of dreams. There's certain points where we sort of come to and think, ah, here I am, I'm in this place. And then we're swept away once more. But I think there's a great power in our mental constructs. And the more I've worked with meditation over the years, it feels like in returning to meditation scenarios, like a particular one like I have them on YouTube. So if you go back to one several times, they do feel like places that have their own authentic life, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
And rather than just being rehashed, they are rediscovered, and they just seem. It's a curious thing about the mental landscapes we can go to, leaving spirituality out of the discussion completely, of how alive they are and how their endurance. I find that quite surprising. So I greatly love working with meditation just on its own, but also with labyrinths as well, because of course, when you are walking a physical labyrinth, then really you can switch your mind off, as it were. It doesn't need to control where we are going. That's all done by the involuntary muscles. And so you don't have to choose direction or anything. And you can really just then, you kind of are in a walking meditation to begin with. And I think that's a beautiful thing about laying out labyrinths, is that they are meditations for the body and for the mind.
Yes.
And it sort of
Yeah.
brings the two together. So there was this sort of, like you said about the left and right brains balancing, and I think as well as that, there's this sort of the body mind
Mm-hmm. Yes.
balancing as well in a quiet
Yes.
space, which isn't often given to the body, I don't think, because our minds are just sort of this furious raging all day.
Yes.
There's stuff going on in the mind. The body just tails along.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. Mine's really forgotten or been conditioned out of forgetting how to drop into body consciousness. So there's
yeah.
something so wonderful about your offerings through YouTube, is this opportunity to be in rest, to be
Mm,
in a dreamscape, and to allow, for me, image is the language of the body, and to allow image
mm,
and sensation to arise and to go on a journey. And
yeah.
yeah, I have to say, I find your meditations really powerful. And I've never taken time to do meditations before yours. I always made an assumption that I wouldn't be able to do them. But what I'm
Mm,
finding with yours is that I'm actually dropping into places that are so deep, it's beyond time space. And then
oh,
it's like I'm going in, and then I come back out, and then I hear your voice again, and then I go
yeah.
back in again, and it's so deeply restful. So for
Oh,
anyone listening, please check them out. It's a Labyrinth Magic Meditation 555 on YouTube,
oh,
and there's a glorious collection of um, meditations that Thorn has created and co-created, I imagine, with sacred energies.
oh,
So yeah,
yeah.
just a wonderful resource for the world. And I'd really love to bring in your books as well, because you're the author of 5 books. Is that right? So
Yeah,
far?
five. Well, five about that. Yeah, I have written some trashy novels as well, but
Oh,
generally I
have
don't
you?
talk about. Oh, yeah, no, I don't want to promote them. In fact, I keep meaning to take them off my page, but no. But yeah, no, I've written quite a few, and actually, well, yeah, I've got a couple on meditation to go, and then there's more meditation to go, which is kind of my meditations, as it were, so far. Although actually, I'm going to bring out another one, which is Labyrinth Meditations, and that should be
Ooh.
out, or let's say April, May, because I'm working on it. It's not too far off, and that's really because I've got a lot of meditations that are specifically based on labyrinths and using particular labyrinth patterns which have their own characters and uses. Um, for instance, some labyrinths are good for anger issues, some are good for connecting inwards, some for outwards, and so on. I've got ones in there that are for chakra balancing, for past life work and stuff. So I've sort of put them into one book, and then I've got three other books on about labyrinths. Well, let's say one is about the Shatra labyrinth, which is working with that medieval labyrinth family. That's um, that's the most recent one, and then a couple of well, actually, I've got one called Simple Nature Labyrinths, which is actually a nice, if you like, entry level book. I don't mean that in a sort of a superior way at all. I just mean that it's kind of assuming that you are totally new to labyrinths and you think, well,
Hmm.
what's the deal with these things? And it was actually written, I wrote it during lockdown because at that point I was living right next to this forest, and there was quite a bit of logging and bits and bobs going on in this forest, but bits of it was still safe and untouched. And I thought I'm gonna make a labyrinth here. I mean, I don't know why it didn't occur to me before. And I could just sort of run over the road into this forest. And actually made it during a storm. I don't know why. It just felt the right time. There was this storm. The light was going overhead, and the position of this labyrinth was between three great beech trees. These three
Wow.
huge beech trees. And I just scuffed it out in the forest floor, and it took about 10 minutes because I knew the pattern. It was just a simple a classical labyrinth with a spiral in the middle. It fit just in there, just right. And then I came back in better weather and laid out twigs and branches. So forest labyrinths like that are really easy to make. And they're a bit like unraveled birds' nests. I always love the look of them as they coil away between the
Yes.
trees. There's some pictures of these on my website, but it's more fun to make a labyrinth like that and then to sort of they're so profoundly in nature. And with working with that one while I lived there, Caroline, which was about a year, I was going to there every other day, um, just to walk on my own. It was the secret labyrinth because apart from my husband Paul, no one really knew where it was. People didn't walk that way. I guess the deer found it, but it was very much just to send healing to the whole forest around it. And
Yes.
sorry, the reason I'm talking about this is because I wrote a book called Simple Nature Labyrinths because I thought, well, why not go off and make more labyrinths in nature that are non-destructive and will just made of the elements that are there? So that
Absolutely.
book there sort of covers all that and also, but in a very nice illustrated way. And I got, wow, it broke my heart having to leave where we lived there, mainly because I had to leave the forest and just leave the labyrinths to kind of decommission it or just to return to what it was. And of course, that's always the way with a labyrinth that you make. In fact, I don't know, in the pictures I shared with you, Caroline, there's a couple of images of one is a big frost labyrinth that I made on a green lawn at a weekend retreat I was running about 8 years ago. Um, um, and that's a temporary labyrinth. In fact, the night of that retreat, the first night, there was this wonderful frost. So I thought I wasn't sure
Amazing.
how I was going to lay out our labyrinth. So I just scuffed out a pattern of a medieval one, um, which you'll see there. And of course, when the frost went the next morning, the pattern remained in the grass for a few
Amazing.
days. So that was wonderful. But
That's
again,
so clever.
that one and there's a beach one as one of the beach ones is
Yes.
shown. And what's the other image? Very much
There's
going, oh, it's a
there's one on.
spoon.
Yes, is it
Yeah, there's
spoons? I couldn't quite make out what
yeah,
they are.
sorry.
Used spoons. Amazing.
Spoon. Yeah, it's the plastic spoons, which was a tip that Jim Buchanan in his wonderful book Labyrinths for the Spirits give of using spoons. That's a really good book. If anyone's looking for a good book to get on labyrinths. But yeah, that was actually for a memorial for a very dear friend at Hill of Tarvet House last September, October. And again, with
Right.
all these labyrinths, they are things that you kind of make. We talked about how the sea will sweep away the beach ones, and maybe that's just been uh, around for a few hours. And but with the other ones, with all labyrinths you make, unless you've actually made one in concrete or stone somewhere, you will have to say goodbye to it at some point and hand it on. So that
Yes.
can be a bit of a pull sometimes, but just part of the order.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So yeah, as I say, we'll share the photograph so everyone can have a look for themselves. But I'm just there's something delighting in me at the different ways that you can be in relationship with these labyrinths, that the different spaces that accommodate and support the labyrinth and the
Yeah.
different ways that you work with labyrinth, for them in memory of someone dear, for workshops, for well-being, that really that again, as I mentioned before, that the labyrinth is infinite, and so
Yeah.
it's really available as an energy to everybody. And
Mm.
so, whoever's listening, really encourage you to take a look at Thorn's website to see what is available, whether it's, I know that you've done an online course, is that right, this last year?
Yeah, last year, yes.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
I'm
So,
kind of making. Sorry, Karen, carry.
no, no, please come in. Come in.
Oh, I can say yes. I'm actually taking a little bit of time out now just to turn that into a book in itself. So I'm hoping to do
Wow.
that in for the end of the year. It's a nice big colourful workbook
Oh,
full of
amazing.
exercises. Yeah.
Amazing. And yeah, so there's the monthly labyrinth at the university in Dundee at the chaplaincy, and there's your beach labyrinths that you do with Owen Pilgrim. Is that his name? So there's
Yes,
a
that's right.
tea, a
Oh,
tea,
yeah.
tea ritual ceremony
Yeah.
that we sort of
Yeah.
embark upon as we're watching you create the labyrinth in real time, which is wonderful. So anyone who's listening, I think this is going out after that labyrinth, but
Mm,
hopefully you're going to be doing more and more of those. So really keep an eye out on the Facebook events and things like that. And I will share all of your contact information, your website and things like that for anyone who is interested or would like to know more. But
okay.
yeah, it could go on and on. There's just been such a fascinating conversation, Thorn. I'm just thrilled. And your sense of knowledge and wisdom and love for Labyrinth really comes through. And I feel like, certainly for myself, I feel like I've been gently guided along a labyrinth through this conversation, sort of weaving in and out of time and space. And
Oh,
it's been really, really lovely. And I think we could talk for many hours more. But we're really coming to kind of the last section of the show, and maybe just turning our attention to. I know you, all of your books, I would definitely recommend to listeners. But is there a book, whether it's about labyrinths or anything really, that's been a great resource for you in your lifetime that you can recommend to listeners?
did you know, Carol, that that was kind of a hard one to answer, but I think actually, excuse me, I think a book that really I've always loved is by Sig Lonergan, and it's called Labyrinths, Ancient Myths and Modern Uses. Um, and it's an old book. It's from is it from the 80s? Is it peering inside? 1991. Okay, well that's still quite a long time ago, isn't it? And
It
it's
is.
it's a really it's it's a really nice. It was the first book I'd seen that was a workbook, and also it's oh, how should we say this? A lot of particularly from America, labyrinth, a lot of the modern labyrinth movement began when from Lauren Artris in San Francisco Cathedral, who brought the labyrinths really out and really brought it to people's consciousness and great. Um, sometimes, how can I put this? Sig's book sort of takes it away from churchiness, shall we say, which is not to knock churchiness, but it really freed up for me using labyrinths from any perspective. And he was sort of looking at how to use labyrinths with the chakras, rewrite, looking at history from women's perspective, and just, kind of taking archetypes out of all that hideous patriarchal language and stuff like that. And although he's been sort of, his book gets sort of slagged a bit, I think, in reviews sometimes because people don't find it perhaps academic enough, but I've always found it really a wonderful, liberating book. So I'd like to give a little thank you to that book because it really has been a sort of a little pointer not in the wilderness, but do you know what I mean? Sometimes
Yeah,
a little
yeah,
candle goes on at the right place and that's where I meant to go. Okay. So yeah, that's my
yeah.
book, I think.
Amazing, wonderful. I'll have to take a look at that. And any words of wisdom that you've received in your lifetime that may have maybe stayed with you and supported you when you've needed them most?
Do you know, Kat, I was thinking about that, and do you know, oddly, as it happens, I'm actually, if you don't mind, I'm going to give two examples. One was that my
Please.
usual thing is that there's a quote by Divine that I love, and that is, there is a hero and a coward in the heart of everyone. Turn your anger against the coward, and the hero will appear. And that's
Oh,
helped me a lot with sort of moving through life's challenging points. But actually, just now, at the last labyrinth in Dundee in February, oddly, it was an incredibly beautiful, powerful one for me. Um, and what I got from that labyrinth was that as human beings, it told me that you do not perhaps so much call in spirits as make a place where they will really like to be. And
yes.
that for me, I think is kind of what the labyrinth is about. It's not so much trying to engineer or dominate and or
No.
even do, but just setting up a place to be and
Yes.
seeing where other things will want to be as well. So, although it's very simplistic language, that really resonates with me, and I really felt, yeah, that's the way forward for me. That's what I want to hang on to.
Beautiful, yes. Both really, really beautiful. But I'm really struck by that sense of the calling in, the invitation. We're not putting onto anyone or anything or any spirit, but there's an opening and an invitation to come join. So there's
Yeah,
something of eros, the erotic,
yeah,
I've
yeah,
always I find that eros as an energy loves to inhabit spaces that are vibrant and loving and
mm,
sacred. Yeah.
yes, yeah. That's yeah, absolutely, yes. Yes, that's great. Oh, well, do you know, it's been wonderful talking today. I'm so pleased to have someone to talk to Labyrinths about because it's largely a silent occupation,
Absolutely,
as it were.
absolutely, totally understand. Yeah, and it's been a real pleasure and joy to hear you talk about labyrinths because, as you say, when I attend labyrinth, there's some lovely sort of welcoming whispers, but ultimately it's a solitary,
Yeah,
silent experience. Well, I say solitary, but it's in no way solitary. There's so much
yeah,
support in every way through it, but it is a potent silent
yeah, yeah. That's a good way.
conversation. Yeah, yeah. So it's
Yeah,
been a real pleasure for me to actually talk out loud without having to lower at the tone, hush our voices so we're not disturbing anyone. And just
yeah,
thank you not only for your time today, Thorn, but for what you do for the world and what you do particularly for Dundee as a city to dutifully tend to the space for the labyrinth and to hold spaces at the at the beach, and also when you've been at the Maggie's Centre doing that
mm,
outdoor labyrinth as well. It's the city of Dundee really benefits greatly, infinitely, for the time and care and the labyrinths that you bring. And
oh,
so I want to say thank you
oh,
from the city to you.
oh. Well, that's very
and
good. Thanks, Caroline.
and I genuinely mean that. And whoever is listening, if really check Thorn's work out, and if you can come to one of the labyrinths, get to one of the beach labyrinths. Really, they're life changing. They really are. The body understands the labyrinth, and it once you invite labyrinth into your life, you'll just want more and more. That's certainly
Yeah,
been my experience. But
yes, yeah.
Thorn, is there anything else you'd like to say just as we're finishing up?
Do you know, Karen, it's just been a very pleasant experience to sort of perhaps give a bit more info on labyrinths and sort of what's perhaps going on slightly behind the scenes.
Yes,
And
yes,
I've really
yes,
enjoyed being able to talk about it because it is often, as you said, it's actually quite solitary being a
yes,
labyrinth keeper.
yes, yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. I get that. Yeah, absolutely. That sense of behind the scenes and that preparation and those rituals. And, my curiosity is like, oh, I'd love to hear that labyrinth song that you sing to
oh,
it.
well,
Anyway,
you know,
maybe one
it's
day.
well, yeah, it sounds good there because the acoustics in the chaplaincy centre are
Yeah,
fantastic. So
they
I
are.
don't know if I'm a good singer, but it sounds great.
Well,
Yeah.
whatever you're doing, it certainly works. So keep doing it. Anyway, so what I'm
Oh,
going to do is I'm just going to switch switch the
yeah.
audio recording off. So big thanks to you. Big thanks to all the listeners, and looking forward to next week's conversation, same time on Tuesdays at 7. Anyway, good evening, dear hearts. It was really lovely to spend this time space with you. Right,
Thank
I'll just switch it off now, Thorn. If you just hold on 2 secs.